Hey everybody, welcome back to the arena. I'm MD, joined by Covey, and yet again another great guest to get into. Before we go into the conversation, just want to thank and show love to everybody who has shown love to us and have continued to show us support.
What's going on, guys? We are now, this will be episode 13, I believe. So
Yeah,
we're making some real progress here. We've got another guest on. Her name is Madeline Kivett?
Kivett, yeah.
Kivett, okay. So I'm getting to know Madeline, or we're getting to know Madeline real time. I actually followed her her Instagram page on mental health actually quite a while ago, and for my personal benefit. And recently, as we've started this podcast, have continued to see her posts and her team's posts, and thought they make some very good points. I resonate with a lot of the stuff they post, and so wanted to reach out and see if she would come on and talk more about it, talk about her mental health journey, etc. So super excited to have her. Thank you, Madeline, for doing this. Without further ado, why don't you just kind of provide a background on yourself and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Okay. Yes, hello, my name's Madeline Kivett. I'm 18 and I'm a freshman in college. Well, I just finished my freshman year of college, so that's super exciting. I have been a mental health advocate for probably, I think, like coming up on 2 years now. It's always something that I've been like passionate about, but I really just started to talk about it more like in the public and on social media when I started dealing with my own things. To me, it was just like really important that like people didn't feel like they had to go through the things that I went through alone, and just kind of like bringing that sense of hope and like peace to other people to like, let them know that they can be successful, they can recover and things like that. But yeah, so that's really, I live in South Carolina. I am hoping to do something like in the future career-wise with mental health, but I haven't really decided on what I want that to be yet. So being a mental health advocate is basically my full-time job because I do it on social media, I do it in classrooms and high schools, basically just all throughout the week. I run a support group here in my town too through an organization, so it's just been really cool to like connect with my community and just be able to like see everyone come together to help me like raise awareness for mental health.
That's great. Super. I mean, no, seriously, that's amazing. When I was 18, I was not anywhere close to that. But I guess, why don't you talk through, if you're comfortable, just like you talked about your struggles, like maybe just kind of talk us through where that stemmed from, and then how you were ultimately able to kind of work through it, and then maybe sounds like find your purpose through kind of helping others work through something that you ultimately struggled with. Because I can relate wholeheartedly. That's kind of why I started this show. Was because I struggled with some stuff related to my mental health, and then now being able to work through it, I kind of want to be able to help others do the same, and this platform is kind of one way to do that.
Right, yeah. So I think like everything really started for me in ninth grade, but it kind of just like went away. And so I really just like, I saw a little bit of anxiety here and there that I was like, ooh, like this is making me uncomfortable. But things didn't really like get serious until my junior year of high school. COVID, I was a sophomore when like quarantine happened for COVID. So it was like we got out in March, and then we were out for like all that time from like March to September. I didn't have to go to school. We were doing online school. I had a job at the time because I was saving up money to buy a car for myself, and I had like just turned 16 in May during quarantine, so it was just like everything was just different. Everything as I knew it was just different, and I think that it was very overwhelming for me personally, but for a lot of other people too. And so the week before junior year started, it was August, and I was just had gotten my driver's license during quarantine, and I was driving to a nail appointment that I had, and I had a panic attack while I was driving. And so that was just kind of like, I don't know, it kind of just like opened this door to like making me anxious when I did anything at all. So it was like I would dwell on like the panic that I felt while I was driving so much that I would like make myself have more panic attacks just thinking about the one that I had. And I think that that can be common for a lot of people who struggle with anxiety and who struggle with panic attacks. But for me, that was like the biggest thing, because I was like, oh my gosh, like how am I supposed to drive, or how am I supposed to do these things while I'm having a panic attack, you know? So I ended up like calling my mom and being like, hey, like this is happening. And I think I just like pulled over and she talked to me like through that. And so like it's 2 years later, it's like 2.5 years, because in September it'll be 3 years, and I still don't drive like by myself. So it's been like, that's been my biggest journey. And through like this process, I have been able to like overcome my anxiety. There was a time where, you know, I isolated myself because I felt so, I don't even know, like I just felt like I couldn't go places, because anytime I would leave the house, I was anxious. Just getting in the car, I was anxious. And so I just became really depressed. Like I lived through suicidal ideation. I lived through, you know, depression episodes where I would just like stay at home for like 9 days at a time. Like it was just really hard for a really long time. And like coming up on my recovery journey, like I just felt like, you know, I've been absent from myself for so long because I stopped going to school. I ended up doing online school. I almost failed my junior year for absences. Like it was just crazy. And so being able to kind of like give those people that I was friends with who like weren't hearing from me, I just kind of like came on my personal Instagram and was like, this is what's happening. This is why I haven't been at school. This is why I haven't had any kind of connection with, you know, anything. Because I really went from being like the vibrant, like happy friend, going to every like sporting event, going to every school event, to like not going to school at all. So it was a very drastic change, which is one of the biggest like warning signs of like, hey, like someone's not okay right now. And so just overcoming, like being able, I still get anxious. I mean, I'm just a very anxious person, but it's not as bad as it used to be. And so like we'll talk about recovery more, but that's just like my biggest journey still is like, you know, I'm being successful. I'm being able to help people, but I also don't have it all figured out yet. And to me, that's super important for people to know.
So starting from like being in the car, and then now it's kind of trickled into just everyday life. Did you ever feel like, or did you feel like, especially being in school, and I want to hear more from your take on like what that environment becomes, did you feel like it became a part of your identity, or how people started to think of you, and did that weigh heavy on you on top of the problems that you were already trying to navigate?
This is actually a really like good question, because I feel like yeah, there was, I don't know, I feel like when people would think about me, like people that I was like not like best friends with, but just friends with at school, you know, they would be like, well, Madeline's at home because she has anxiety. Well, Madeline's not coming to school because she has anxiety. And that was just like, you know, I feel like, I don't want to say that like, I mean, I'm not the first mental health advocate there ever was. People have been advocating forever. But I feel like in my community, like at school, like people have been so much more open since seeing us like come like, you know, come open about these things, and just being like, you know, like, hey, it's okay to struggle. Because it's insane, like the amount of like, I don't know, like guilt and like shame and embarrassment that I felt when I first started dealing with things. And it was like, I would show up to school and people would be like, oh, like look who decided to come to school today. And it's like, if you only knew half of it, you know, it's like, if you, like I'm trying to be here, like my mom would drive me to school as a junior in high school, and we would pull up in front of school, and I would like shake and cry, because I just felt so physically hard to step into school, to step into an environment where I knew people were going to be like, well, where have you been? Like, why haven't you been here? You know? And so I just feel like being able to be open and be able to like share those things is, yes, it's helping other people, but it absolutely does like give you an identity. And it, you know, and some people have a hard time like having that like title, and that's why they don't speak up. But for me, it's like, you know, like I'll be the girl who has anxiety if it means that other people can see that like it's okay to struggle.
Yeah, isn't that crazy how simply talking about, you know, expressing how you're feeling or what you're working through can inspire others to make themselves feel not alone. Like, to your point, I mean, I'll speak from like I'm not a rocket scientist when it comes to mental health, but open and I'll talk about it, and it has inspired others. And it's crazy how something so little can actually create so much change. So that's amazing. And I have a couple questions. So one, you said, like, what prompted you to actually then go and post on your personal page about kind of what you were working through? Because I know, like speaking for me, like, I would never have done something like that because I was so there was so much shame, embarrassment, you name it. So I would have to imagine you were able to work through things with someone or with yourself to be able to get to that point. So what prompted that, and like what strategies, specifically for anxiety, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that listen to this that have anxiety, like, worked for you and helped you. I mean, you haven't completely overcome it and it's an everlasting battle, but it have helped you improve.
I think the drive to kind of like post on my main account was really just I don't know, it was Mental Health Awareness Month. It was in May. And so this time of year, it was 2 years ago this month, which is just insane. But, I think about it and I'm like, it was just, I had got, like, in February of 2021, I had gotten diagnosed with vertigo, and it was like it was happening so frequently to me, which is basically just like really sudden and severe dizziness. And so it was happening so often for me that, like, I couldn't go to the grocery store, I couldn't go anywhere. So it was like I'm sitting at home all the time, like, with my thoughts and with like these feelings, and like I know I'm not the only person that feels this way. Like, there are so many people, especially with anxiety. I think anxiety is like the most common mental health condition. But I just was like, I had my friend Bella who runs the account with me. Like, me and her have been friends since I was in 10th grade. And so, like, I knew that she struggled with it, and her, she had some people that she knew that was struggling. And so I was like, well, if I'm sitting at home, I'm not going to school because I can't. I'm not going to see these people anytime soon. So, like, my biggest thing was, like, I just need to tell people, like, my story, like my journey, so that they can know that, like, it's okay that if they feel like this. And also just to kind of extend, like, hey, like, message me or like text me if you feel like you need someone to talk to, if this is you. And it was just like, mental health, as crazy as it sounds, like, just wasn't something that people talk about that much. And I feel like it's still not, like, in our society, in my generation. But I think I'm just like, I don't notice it as much because I talk about it so much, so I don't notice, like, how many people don't talk about it as much as I used to. But it is just, like, insane how, people, I don't know, it's just, like, the things that they would say, and, the biggest thing is, like, even when I was struggling and people knew it, like, I didn't walk into school and have this, like, sign written on my face that was, like, I'm struggling, And so it was, like, you just have to kind of take into consideration that people are going through things around you that you absolutely know nothing about. It's not about, like, it's not easy for everyone to just hop on social media and start talking about it, because generally it usually is, like, the worst time of somebody's life. Like, it can be the hardest part of somebody's life, and so that's hard to talk about.
It really creates a sense of empathy. Like, I think it going through something really hard really creates empathy, because it's helped me, like, understand to really, like, genuinely to always be kind to people, or really do your best to do that, because you never know what someone's going through, and just being a kind person can make that person's day. And I think empathy is so important, but I think you have to feel the bad and have to go through the darkness, right, to be able to understand what it's like.
Right.
Madeline, from your perspective, you talked about your generation. I think it's important for people who maybe are not struggling or even are struggling to understand how they can make a more supportive environment for somebody like you to show up to school and feel more comfortable in doing that. Like, describe that environment, describe your generation from your perspective. What does that environment look like? And just help educate on what that looks like to you.
I think the biggest thing, and when I make Instagram posts, or I try to like at least add in the caption somewhere, like, be a safe place for others, and that's basically just what I've tried to do as I've, like, kind of gone through this journey, is just and I think really, as cliche as it sounds, like just being kind is really important because, you can always tell by the room that you walk in. Like if you were to walk into a room and there's people in there, you can tell whether you would feel comfortable sitting down and sharing something with them or not, just by walking in. And so I think just like being kind and just, being reassuring and being like, hey, like, if you need anything, like, I'm here for you. And it's as simple as just being like, I hope you're okay. Like, I hope you're doing well. Like I said, I work for a nonprofit organization in my town, which it's actually nationwide. So there's one in every state, but it's called NAMI. And we have like a little building that they work in and where, that's where I hold my support groups and things like that. And when I walk in there, like I know, like I'm comfortable because I know that these people care. I know that they're not going to be mean. I know that they're going to be kind. And so it makes me feel better about being there and being able to help these people. Whereas if they were, had like a bad look on their face because they knew what we were about to talk about, or if they had like, it's just the judge. I feel like you can read judgment before it even happens. And so
is judgment what makes the group unsupportive? Like what do you think, even if they meant well, but like what do you think makes a group unsupportive or an environment unsupportive?
I think sometimes judgment and like being unsupportive comes from just like lack of knowledge. Because I think once you go through something like that, it would be really hard to feel judgment or unsupportive towards someone for dealing with what you went through. And it kind of makes me sad that like you kind of have to experience these hard things to feel that like level of empathy for people who are going through it too. And I think that's the biggest thing, is like people truly don't understand until they go through it. Because when people think about anxiety, they think about being nervous before like a test or before like, performing or something like that, or presenting a project in front of their class. Like you get a little bit nervous. But it's so much bigger than that, because when it starts to impact your daily life and the things that you do in your daily life, that is when you call it like anxiety rather than just being nervous. And like people think about depression and they think about just being sad. It's just I think there's just a huge like level of education that people don't have in our society, and in my generation, because I feel like if you're educated on it and you truly know like what all these things entail and what they do to people, like people would be a lot more understanding and supportive.
Can I just say, I mean, that's just a very impressive and mature perspective around, and that's how we can tell that Madeline's an empathetic, not just individual, but leader, because it's so easy to have spite for people that create that unsupportive environment and compound the issue, but you come from a place of empathy and just simply understanding they don't know any better. They come from a lack of knowledge. Our environment doesn't have enough education going into it, and I think that really speaks to, one, a big heart, but two, just your, just how empathetic you actually are.
Yeah. So I guess on that point, I guess going back to strategies that work for you, have you gone to therapy? If so, what's your experience been like? What would you tell people that maybe have that stigma when they hear the word therapy associated with it, of like, oh man, like therapy, that's pretty serious stuff, because I know I had that. So like, what would you tell people, if you've gone, by the way, like we're getting to know each other live here. Like I would presume, if I was a betting man, I would bet that you have, but would be curious to get your thoughts there.
I started seeing a therapist like 2 months after I started like really struggling with anxiety. I actually, before therapy, tried a medication and it like made me suicidal. So I was like, okay, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to try therapy instead. So I did see a therapist for about 6 months. And just being able to like sit down in her office and just have someone that wasn't like my friend or my family, who I knew like it wasn't going to hurt her feelings to hear about how I was struggling. Because although parents and like, sisters and brothers and all that, like they're super supportive, it's also like they're your parents and they love you and they don't want to hear about you hurting because it hurts them, So it's really nice to have someone who isn't like a family member to just sit down with and just be able to just share everything. And on top of that, just be able to, like, she's educated, she knows what she's talking about, so she was able to help me, like, give me tips and tricks on how to get through my panic attacks and how to start slowly driving again and things like that. So I saw her for about 6 months, and then I actually saw a different one through Zoom for like 5 more months. So I was a huge therapy person. It helped me a lot. And I just remember like my last therapy session, my therapist being like, I don't think you need me anymore, which is just crazy because it's like you see how much progress you've made. And even when not struggling with a mental health condition, I think like everyone can use a therapist, I'm not like in the midst of like struggling right now. Like I'm not in my worst point right now. Like I'm doing pretty good, and like I've thought about just having one, just to have someone to like talk to about like life and how everything is and all that. So it's just I think it's a really good coping mechanism. And I did eventually start on another medication too, like talking about recovery. April of 2021, after I got diagnosed with vertigo, which was caused by anxiety apparently, which is what my doctor told me after like getting test runs and everything. And so he was like, this is never going to go away unless you get on an anxiety medication. So I did, and I still take it. So it's been like 2 years and I'm still on the same medication. I really wasn't a big medicine person. I was very like, I don't want to rely on something to be happy. I don't want to be addicted to something. But it's been life-changing for me. Medication and therapy have truly been life-changing.
So you're on this journey right now that you've mentioned several times, and we talk a lot about journey versus destination, setting goals, making right decisions. Just curious, like, do you have a goal in mind? Do you have goals, stepping stones? Do you have some sort of blueprint mapped out as to where you'd like to be maybe next month, next year, etc.?
I honestly have been thinking like, through college, like at first I really wanted to be like an elementary school teacher, and I have completely scratched that because after being in the classroom with students, it's just not something that I want to do for my life. And so now I'm looking at child psychology. I think that when it comes to children like under the age of 10, a lot of parents like find that their struggles start then. And so for career wise, for like my life plan, that is kind of what I'm looking at. But as far as like in the next couple months, in the next couple years, before all of that, I really just plan to continue being like a volunteer through NAMI and being able to go to schools and talk to students, because I think that has like helped tremendously with like, we need to get this education in high schools. We need to, make sure that they're educated, because a lot of times, like me, I was a junior in high school and I went to the doctor and got a diagnosis thrown in my face that I had nothing, like I didn't know what, I was just like, oh, okay, I have anxiety, like I don't really know what that means. And so being able to educate people and just like, not making, or just making them feel like they don't have some kind of like disease because they're struggling with mental health, and also like we've gone like with NAMI, I've gone to like the State House of South Carolina and just been able to like help like talk to people who are like, congregating around like the State House for mental health, which was super cool. And we have like meetings in at the city hall, and we've just done so much, and just being able to like, be a part of all that, along with building this huge community on Instagram.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to elaborate on the Instagram piece a little bit in your page, because I did follow it when maybe before I started my journey with mental health. So maybe just talk a little bit like your plans there, how that kind of transpired, that whole thing.
Well, so in 2021, it was actually September of 2021 when we started the account, so not that long ago, surprisingly. But I was a senior. I was a senior in high school. It was my first semester of senior year, and my friend Bella was a junior in high school, and she played on the volleyball team. And I had obviously been struggling with mental health for a while, and I just kind of was like, like I had this thought in mind, like maybe we could do this, just to like, I had no intention of it like getting any kind of like, following. I just was like, okay, like let's do this and help the people in our community. So it's just kind of like an idea. And then Bella, who obviously runs the account with me, she went to a volleyball game, and she had been open about her struggles with an eating disorder. And our rivalry school here in our town was who they were playing, and she got like chanted at while she was playing volleyball about her eating disorder and about her mental health. And so I was like, this is not okay. We will not stand for this. I just was so disgusted and just so honestly just hurt, and it didn't even happen to me, but I was just like, wow, like this is the reality of the situation that we're seeing like in our society right now. And so I texted her that night when, you know, she was upset about it, and I was like, look, like they thought that they took our voices tonight, but like it's time that we get our voices back and we educate people and we help people, because this is absolutely ridiculous. And I was like, this is what causes people to commit suicide. This is why we lose people to suicide, because of stuff like this. So we started the account, and we had about 20 followers for like 3 months. And then in January of 2022 is when it really took off and blew up. And we have just been kind of riding this journey since then. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, because at first we had no idea what we were doing. We were just like, okay, like let's just do this. But now we've made so many friends, and like, you know, I tell people all the time, I'm like, yeah, we have 30,000 followers, and to someone who, you know, wants to reach out for help, that looks like a lot, but I never want to be looked at as like some influencer on the internet. Like I don't want people to feel like, oh, well, I can't DM them because they won't answer. Like, I want it to be a community where like our followers help each other. We can connect with them. We can build connections with them. We can help them through this. And because I know that like when I see people on Instagram who have that many followers, like the first thought in your head is like they're not going to like answer because they have so many. But I never want to be looked at like that. Like I just want to have this like, you know, huge community of people who are just supporting and loving and helping to one another, and that's basically what we've done.
So I want to ask a question, like on a more super powerful story. I want to ask more question on a serious note, if you're comfortable talking about it, because I've never dealt with suicidal thoughts, and I'm sure there are listeners who have, and I would love to just get your take on like how you felt during that moment. What you would tell someone to someone that's maybe like having thoughts like that, and kind of how to work through it.
So I think like the first time I was in denial for a long time, because you get that like sense of like a thought comes into your head and you're like, I know that this is not how I feel, and I know that I don't want to die, so I can't really understand why my brain is telling me this. And that was kind of where I was at. I knew that I was struggling, and I knew I was having a hard time, but I couldn't grasp the thought of me like actually trying to like kill myself. Like it was just not something that was like ever gonna be reality for my life. And when it happened, I was really scared. And I told my mom and dad, like I was very open with them, because I was like, this is a battle that I can't like fight by myself. Like I am so incapable of like being able to kind of just get through this alone. So it started happening the first time I started a medication, which I don't want to scare anyone, because medication is like truly life-changing when you find the right one. But your doctor always warns you, like when you take stuff for anxiety and depression, there is like a chance that like if this isn't for your brain, or if it's not right, like that can happen. And so I mean, there were times where like I would be sleeping, and like I would have dreams about like me like committing suicide, which was super scary because it was like so vivid and real, which is just like the reality of how these like serious and strong these things can be. I felt, you know, your brain is the strongest organ in your body, and it's really good at convincing you of things. And there were times where I would go into the living room and be like, Mom, I need you to come get in bed with me, because I feel like I'm gonna hurt myself and not even realize that I'm doing it. And so that's like a really dark and scary place to be, because you feel like your mind is now in control and you're not. Like, yeah, it's so crazy. Like, and you don't really you really don't know what it's like until you're living it.
Well, I'm listening, and I can't relate. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't relate, but I would ask, like, are you like coming in and out of like self-awareness in those moments? Is it when you say I don't have control versus when I do have control, is it, you know, back and forth within like moments? It
kind of is. Yeah. It's like 1 minute you're like, okay, like I don't want I don't want, like, this is not what I want for my life. And then the next moment, it's like your brain is like, you know, trying to convince you of it. And I could be like in a reality to where like I knew this is not what I wanted for me, and I knew this was something that I was never gonna do, but I just felt like my brain was like telling me like trying to like give me a plan on how to do it and be like, this is what you have to do, this is what you're gonna do. And like I just felt like I just didn't feel like safe by myself. I was like, something's gonna happen, like I know it is. I was like I don't really feel like it's almost like I've never, like, seriously, I've never been like the person who can like be any kind of intoxicated because of my anxiety. I like freak out when like my body starts to feel different, but like I feel like it's almost like what it would be like to be on drugs. Like you feel like you're like, you know, like going crazy because you're like, oh my gosh, like this could happen, and now I'm like, well, I don't know how it's going to happen because I'm not going to do it, but it's just like, it's such a crazy mindset to live in, and it's really scary, really scary.
I'm curious, you know, what your relationship with purpose has been, because what I hear today, or what I hear of what you're doing today, sounds a lot like you're using your journey, your life to help others and to help spread education. That seems to be your response, and you seem really active in doing it. Versus maybe 2 years ago when you weren't doing these things. Was there a time in your life where you didn't feel purpose? Is there a loud and clear purpose now? Like, what is your relationship with the concept or that idea of having a purpose in life?
Yeah, and really quickly before you go there, because I just, on the suicidal topic, like I just want you to provide like any sort of advice, strategies for people, that anyone that may be listening to this, to kind of help them. Anything that worked for you. It sounded like you had parents to go to, but I just want to make sure we touch on that before moving on.
I talk to people all the time who have like suicidal thoughts, who like reach out to our account, and I really think like when it comes down to it, it's like anxiety symptoms are physical, and you can do stuff to kind of talk yourself out of physical things. Like you can take deep breaths, and you can have like little techniques that you do to like distract yourself. But I think that when it comes to like living in a suicidal state of mind, it's more of like distractions, really. Like when I would like feel like those like thoughts coming on, I would like call a friend and be like, hey, like, do you want to play a game or like talk about this? Or I wouldn't tell them like, hey, I'm suicidal right now. I would be like, you know, let's just have a normal conversation. Or I would like read a book, or I would if it were during the day, I would get out and I would go for a walk, get fresh air. It's just really anything that can like, I think like sitting in one place, whether it's your living room or your house or your bedroom, like I feel like doing that is just not good in the moment, you know. And it's like hard to grasp like a sense of reality when you're living in that mental state, but like it's also super important to just be like, this is not my forever. This is right now, but this is not forever. And like that's what my dad used to tell me. Like he would be like, Madeline, like you're not gonna live like this forever. Like, yes, I know that it hurts and it sucks right now, but pain is so temporary, and there's such a bigger thing to life than just being, you know, in this little hole that seems like is never ending. So that was definitely something that was like, you know, like I need to distract myself, even like turning on a TV show and watching it, or turning on a movie, like just something to distract yourself in the moment. And then when you get out of that moment, just being able to be like, you know, reflect on it and see like, okay, like I got through it this time, now it's going to be better next time, or I can handle it next time because I got through it this time, and things like that. But as far as like a purpose goes, I really just feel like, I mean, I think about my life, and I think about my life before I started seeing these things in my life, and I just feel like I was meant for this. I feel like I went through what I went through so that I could be here, and helping other people. I truly feel like, you know, when I looked back on my mental health journey when things were really bad, I used to always ask myself, like, why me? Why is this happening to me? Why right now, when I'm supposed to be having fun in high school with all my friends? Why this time of life? And now it all makes sense to me, because now it's like, okay, yeah, that was hard and I went through all that, but it's because it's so that I could come out on this side being able to share my testimony and help people with what I went through who may be dealing with the same things. and there were times where I just felt like I didn't have a purpose, and I've not always been an empathetic person who cares about other people. I mean, there were times in high school, you know how high school is, when people spread rumors about you and start drama. I would text them and be like, super rude, and be like, why would you say this, and da 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 da. But like, now that I look back on it, like, it's just so not worth it. Like, people, I mean, life is already hard enough as it is. We might as well just make it a lot easier on ourselves and just be kind and be able to just like connect with other people.
Well, I'll say, Madeline, you've been just super inspiring to us, and we're 10 years further ahead in this journey than you are, and you've got so much ahead of you, and I can just tell from how you speak about your life and your journey. And you brought up the why me piece, and I actually recently saw a baseball player that I like survived cancer, and one of the things that he talked about was his initial thoughts were, why me, right? But then it turned into, why not me? Why not me, and why can't I be a survivor and take this thing head on? And I think, why not somebody like Madeline, who is so strong, empathetic, has the right responses, it seems, at the right times, and now is able to take the thing that's happening to her, why not me, and then go out and help other people. So you've been just a force for good, and such a positive force in our world. So I hope that you feel that, and you know that on a daily basis, because I know that at times it can be tough to hear that reminder as frequently as you deserve.
And I think that's how you kind of figured it out when I hear that. When I hear when you're able to flip that victim mindset to a mindset of, okay, this happened for a reason. And right. I was relating to you the whole time for myself, because I did the same. For a while it was, why me? Why do I have to go through this? Why was I, and I've been able to change it into, I'm glad I've been able to do it, because I've been able to grow, and I can now help others work through something similar. So right. I think it's just extremely mature of you. I mean, I'm going through what you're doing you're 19, I'm 27. You're about 8 years ahead of me, so I'm super excited, just genuinely, to see where you take your life, because I think you're going to inspire a ton of people, and it's been such an incredible story. I guess a question: how can parents, how can adults help support teenagers, high schoolers, kids like going into college? It sounds like, from what I've heard, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but you had some very supportive parents that were emotionally there for you to support you, which I know a lot of families, I think, a lot of people from that generation is more kind of the hardball mentality, tough it out, because that's what they were taught.
Right.
So just like, how can we, myself, parents, like, how can they better support teenagers as they're going through this like very hard thing called life?
Honestly, I think when I talk to teachers about this, I always tell them, like, my dad's a teacher, and so he lives like kind of like the life with them, like through their like hardest times. But I honestly feel like when it comes down to it, it's more of like a I don't know, it's more of like, a parents always ask like where is this coming from? And it's like, we don't have the answer to that question. I don't know where it's coming from. Like, adults and teachers, and I feel like teachers are like, well, what's going on in your life right now that's making you feel this way? And it's like, I genuinely don't know. And so I think, like, not expecting so much of like a why, and more of like let's just worry about, like, let's not worry about why it's happening, because we don't know why. Let's more so worry about the fact that it's happening, and now we need to do something about it, if that makes sense. So I think it's really just important for, like, especially teachers and like adults and things like that, for just to be like, like, supporting and just being like, hey, like, guys, like, if you need anything, like, I'm here. I've gone to my dad's classroom and talked to his classroom, and he's had students like reach out to him about their mental health, and like, it's kind of like feels, I don't even know what the word is. It's really rewarding, because my dad like watched me go through this process and like helped me through it, and I've like almost just kind of like inspired him, because he's, ever since I have been through this, like he's opened up about his own anxiety, and now he's medicated for it and he's getting the treatment that he needs. And so it's more so of like let's help each other, you know. And I think just the whole like tough it out kind of thing, it really is more so common with like boys than it is girls too. There's such a huge stigma around like boys' mental health, men's mental health, like telling them to just like tough it out and be a man and whatnot. But I think really just accepting the fact that like it's happening is like a huge part, and parents for sure, because, you know, my dad always said like, if my daughter is sick, like I can take her to the doctor and we can fix it, but I can't just walk her into a doctor's office and fix it right away. And so I think the not understanding part is hard for parents, because it's like, well, what do we do now? Like, how do we fix this? But it's more so of like I mean, it's really just being there and just being like,
and
hey,
hearing you, right? Like, I think a lot of kids, a lot of even adults just struggle to be heard. And I think, and that goes back to empathy, but I think that can go a long way. It's like everyone's so quick to try and diagnose the problem or relate to themselves.
Right.
When in reality, just listening to the person and actually hearing what they're saying can go a long way. Like, I know that's helped me, and it sounds like that's something that you're trying to employ, and kind of when you're working with students as well.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like you're being heard if you're able to express and ask for that help, right? And it sounded like you were pretty quick to do that, whereas, like you said, maybe men in particular, they have this tough it out initial phase where, no, I'm not going to initially ask for help. Did you have that phase? Like, did you ever try to take this on alone at certain points before, you know, saying, hey, I need to loop my parents in, I need to loop a friend in from school, maybe I need to, you know, raise my hand to a teacher?
When it first happened, when I first had the panic attack, I called my mom to tell her, like, hey, like, something's happening to me right now, and I'm driving, and I don't know what it is. But as it got, like, worse, I was kind of, like, trying to hide the severity of it, just because I didn't want to, like, hurt their feelings. Not that they would be upset that I was going through something, but it's just, like, no parent wants to see their child like struggling with something. There have been times where my mom has sat in the doctor's office with me and cried. There have been times when she sat with me, you know, and just been upset over what I was going through, not because I was going through it, but because I was hurting and she could see that. My dad has, like, you know, watched me struggle and cried before. Like, it's just one of those things where it's like they don't want to see you struggle. And I think the hardest thing for me was trying to explain to my mom, like, when I was struggling with suicidal thoughts, especially, like, Mom and Dad, like, how do I tell you that I want to die, but, like, I don't really want to die, but that's what my brain's telling me, you know? And it's just, like, no parent wants to hear that. And so there definitely was a time, like, I hid a lot from them. They knew I was struggling, but they didn't know, like, the real depths of it, because I was just scared of hurting them. But when it got, like, too much for me to handle by myself, I was like, look, I just have to be honest with you, and I know it might make you a little bit sad, but, like, this is what's happening, and I can't do it by myself.
So what is your Instagram page called? You know, I think people who gravitate to your story want to continue to follow you. You know, I've taken my scroll through, but take an opportunity now to just promote what you're doing on social media. Let's grow that 30K. I know you don't want to necessarily become that blue check marked influencer, but take an opportunity to just share what you're doing, and what, you know, how people can find you on Insta or otherwise.
Our Instagram is just all one word, Your Mental Health is a Priority. We do have, like, a TikTok and a Twitter too, which you can find in the links of the bio of that. I'm really not that good at posting on TikTok. I try, but I'm just like, I don't know what to post. But we are on Twitter every now and then, but Instagram is our main thing. We have, like, you can learn about, like, mental health. We have all of, like, the text resources, the call resources, like the hotlines. Those are all there. You can also find, like, we have, like, merch stores. I think we're doing one right now for Mental Health Awareness Month, which is my favorite month. I love being able to just, like, go crazy for mental health. But yeah, so that is all just on our Instagram, which is just Your Mental Health is a Priority. You can find us there. And yeah.
Do you ever get Do you ever get like negative feedback? Do you ever get hate from people, like either in comments or people maybe like at school? Obviously, like you are living in the arena at 18 years old, putting yourself out there, like that is the vulnerable place to be. So I'm just curious, have you gotten any of that, and like how have you initially dealt with it? How do you deal with it now? Have you kind of learned how to, how have you kind of freed yourself from all the naysayers?
Honestly, I used to live in like that headspace where I like cared about like what other people said about me, and like it would hurt my feelings when people talked bad about me. But now I'm to the point where like I just don't care. Like I just like my own brain has hurt me enough. Like there's nothing that you can say that's gonna hurt my feelings. But I don't really necessarily like. I mean, I don't stand for it because negativity to me is just like not needed. It's also completely just. I mean, it's just stupid. And so, I mean, we get hate comments sometimes where people are like, like, oh, this doesn't really happen. And then we actually did like a feeding the homeless thing where we like bagged up like foods and went and like put them in food pantries. And the people who donated money to help us like raise like to buy food wanted me to make a YouTube video because they wanted to see us doing it. And so I made a YouTube video of it, and then people were like, you shouldn't like, post everything that you do.
You're never going to please everyone.
No.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, fine, like, whatever. But, I mean, that's just the thing. And, like, in November, I brought on my good friend Alex. He is on the account with us now, too, because he's super passionate about mental health. He's a senior in high school, and I just love the way that he is just, like, so inspired to, like, help people. And especially being a boy in high school, like, it's just... I don't know, it's super cool, like, his drive and passion, and he actually got, like, a no-caller ID phone call the other night from someone at his school, like, talking about, like, making fun of the account, and it's just, like, people are just so desperate for attention, and you get to a point in your life where you're, like, whatever.
And like, honestly, you kind of have to be empathetic for those people, too, because they're suffering. And that's that's one way of coping with it, is bringing others down. So like that's what I've learned is like, just not taking things personal for that reason. And that's something for me that's really been able to resonate with me because I used to be the same way, and that's exactly why I was doing it, why I was trying to bring others down. You don't even realize it at the time, but like hindsight now, it's like, okay, and that's why it's all just, dirt, right, at the end of the day. Because you know what your purpose is, you know what you're doing, it's for a good cause.
Right, and it's like we've had people reach out before and say negative things, and I'm like, I literally have just been so straight up and been like, are you having an insecurity problem? Because if you are, I would be happy to talk you through this, but like being negative to me and hateful to me is not the way to do it. And I'm like, you're lucky that I can handle it, because there are people out there who are struggling who can't handle things like this and would cause them to like, push them to the edge. And then every time, without fail, they're like, yeah, I actually am. I'm sorry I was rude. So it's like sometimes you just have to approach it that way and be like, are you struggling? Like, can I help you? Instead of being so negative to me, like, let's work through this problem so that you're not negative to other people and cause them to take their lives, So it's just really important to be kind.
Yeah, I mean, two big things there, right? When people are being negative, they don't know any better. They're coming from a bad place of their own, and... I love your responses consistently, let me help you too. Let me not pass judgment to you, but let me help you. And then I love the example that you bring up with the YouTube video dilemma. It just speaks to you really can't please everybody. And you picture like that flag and like tug of war where, if you please one side, then the other side's going to tug. If you please the other side is going to tug. If you please both sides, you're not going to make any movement. You're not going to advance anything. You're going to be stuck, paralyzed in your position. So really love the action that you've been able to take once you figured out and once you learned, hey, I'm way more productive, I'm way better at this when I can stop caring what other people think.
Yeah, like the only way you can, I feel like, please both sides is you're then not pleasing yourself. It's at the cost of yourself. And right. You're trying to be all these different, you have all these different hats on and these different people you're trying to be, and that's exhausting, and that's not authentic, and like that causes, negative emotions and just and all sorts of stuff like that. So Thank you so much, Madeline, for doing this and for being so open. I mean, it's been seriously a really, really cool conversation. To wrap things up, I've got 3 rapid fire questions for you. So
Okay.
just kind of answer them off the top. You can give like a reason behind them, because
Okay.
most of them will require some sort. I'd like to hear kind of why. But
Okay.
all right, the first one is best piece of advice you've ever received, or just like a favorite quote.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I think honestly, like through this whole process, like the best advice that I've gotten would be like really just my parents like being able to be like their thing that they always told me when I was like struggling was like tomorrow needs you, and they would always like say that, and we made it into like a collection of merch when my friend committed suicide in July. And so that has been like, that's not really advice, but like it kind of is. When I was struggling, like they would say that. And so I think that has been like the most thing that has like held me together for so long.
That's very powerful.
So sorry to hear
yeah.
about the friend, by the way.
Oh yeah, it's okay. Thank you.
If you could have dinner with anyone in the world, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh my gosh. I have no idea. You know what? I'm gonna be super like girl here and say Justin Bieber.
Justin Bieber. Why?
I don't know. I don't know why. I love him.
Right. Easy, and there's your answer. That's why. All right, and then lastly, like just hobbies. Like, what do you like to do in your free time? Stuff like that.
Oh, okay, yeah, here's a good one. I am a huge college sports fan. I watch college basketball, college football. I never miss a game. I'm a huge Clemson fan. My whole room is like decked out in Clemson every year, so I'm just anything sports related, count me in. That's my favorite thing to do, other than like when I'm not like, doing all the mental health stuff.
I mean, that's a hobby in itself, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Madeline. Thank you so much for having this conversation. I know all of our listeners are going to greatly benefit from it. So we're going to sign off here. But again, thank you very much.
No, thank you guys so much.